Hey, what's going on, guys? If you remember recently, I did a stream of Memetide. And if you're unaware what Memetide is, it is Talishar Riptide that runs a bunch of D-Reacts, a couple support cards, and only Nourishing Emptiness as its primary attack. That's it. That's the deck. It's not too complex at the end of the day. But I won my skirmish, so we got the win on Riptide. We got a little points on Riptide, which is awesome. And the problem with this deck is that there are certain matchups that are just like almost impossible to win. So with Riptide and Blitz, that's kind of like you have to leverage which, based on what build, what you are going to face in your meta. Otherwise, it just the Riptide problem of it's not that I want to win, it's that I want to enjoy the games. So sometimes you gotta like figure out if you can enjoy the games and if you're gonna play Riptide, which I did. And some of the matchups that you're pretty much with this build not going to be able to beat very well is OG Prism's a little tough because if they establish a board state with auras, it's basically impossible to win. Same thing with Dromai and the Dragons. OG KO is basically just do they win the dice rolls? But that's every matchup. Blaze is very tough to win because you're just not fast enough. And if they decide to go off and you draw a hand of reds, you're just screwed. And ironically enough, the mirror match. If they have Dreadbore, go figure. You tend to not do well in that matchup. But yeah, we can go over some of the matchups I win. I went against OGKO. Unfortunately, he rolled pretty bad, so yeah, that tends to nuke your chances as KO. Round 2, I played against Feng. Feng is typically favored, but if they play very specifically and like pretty efficiently, it tends to be a little bit harder. He actually got me through a couple times where he threw a attack after and didn't even swing the second dagger, which kind of screwed up some of the math. And he had a couple times where he was able to just give it go again and not waste a card with Glint. And kind of screwed me. At the end of the day, though, Pendulum Trap pulled its weight. So, yeah. The sigils were rough that he played, though, because that's a lot more damage I have to get through. So, then round 3, I played against New KO, and New KO is interesting, but if you are unable, as the KO, to play correctly around your own pulping, which sometimes it just doesn't line up correctly, then it does screw you, unfortunately. So, and this deck can block that very well. But to get onto the deck and to give you a general idea how it works is that you do Mask, you pay for it, always get Nourishing because it's the only attack in deck. And if you have a buff, play it, reload if you have Premeditate so you can get the triggers and stuff. And pop Goliath Gauntlet and send it for Dominate. I've sent it for 11 Dominate pretty frequently off of these. And the entire deck is just based around going first, popping those, and boom. And then you start the game with 2 equipment, and then the sword, which you eventually lose to the sword. The entire deck is based around supporting the Nourishing Emptiness and dealing as much damage on the defensive, or even with Talishar, as you can. So you have things like Come to Fight, which goes into the cost curve and it blocks 3, which is why you run it, and then Premeditate, which is just too good. And then you have your support cards that just bring it back, like Memorial Ground, your Remembrance back here, and Codex. Unfortunately, Codex is a little bit awkward in this deck, so anytime you play it, you essentially speaking have to have a 3-card hand to be able to do that, because you have to forcibly discard a card. Unless you have Come to Fight, well, you still would need a 3-card hand in that case. But yeah, if you have Come to Fight, you can just pitch blue, do it, play Codex, grab Nourishing, and send 9. But when you do that and it does hit, you get to have a 6-card hand, so it's really nice. You have all your traps except for the reaction red because it's just not that great in the meta. Pendulum Trap is good because it's a yellow that pitches for this and this. And also in the matchups that you do have reactions, that matchup can go to Fatigue pretty frequently. So this card pulls its weight in those matchups very hard. And then you have your support cards of D-Rex, which is just like, Shelter, Sink, Take Cover. One of the combos with Sink Below is that when you have a 4-card hand with any card, a yellow, Sink Below, and a Memorial, you You can play Memorial, put Nourishing on top, sink below, sink the extra card, and then boom, you have a 2-card hand with Nourishing in your hand. And the reason why you do this is even if you take the extra like couple like 3 to 6 damage because you do that, you still get to get a 5-card hand the next turn, and you dealt damage. So it's like knowing when the numbers line up well to be able to do that. But sometimes I've just said, okay, we'll do that, and then block the last card in the arsenal version. It depends on the situation. Yeah, support cards like Plan for the Worst, obviously, and then Take Cover lets you navigate Dominate a little bit better, and then get crew traps in your arsenal when you need to. It happens. Warmongers is just a card to help you against certain matchups where you can slow them down so that you can try to like recoup yourself. This one's on me is kind of just a general purpose card that is effective in some cases. Truce, same thing. It's just they're just the best blue slots that you can put. It's not just opt. They actually provide some benefit as opposed to like these cards, which are okay sometimes. Not this. And then we move on to our sideboard, which is just 2 AB for 3 AB against the arcane matchups. You just need it. Poison the Wells. One of these is a flex card because I don't know if you need to, but I would say that flex card is for leveraging what your meta is, and I figured that there's going to be significantly more CYB decks than Blaze, so I just kind of said, alright, I'm just going to kind of give up the Blaze matchup now and leverage into Poison the Well. I used to have Feign Death, but I determined that it wasn't doing enough in this type of deck, because if you're taking damage, you're starting to lose. So I wanted Oasis because it was also a little bit more universal. Remembrance is for those long matchups, which one's in a minute, but it basically lets you recover Codex of Frailty, Nourishing, and buff. I've actually hit blue sometimes when I don't have enough, and just to like refuel a little bit, but it's usually for these cards. So going into matchups a little bit. Aggro, you're pretty much just running straight forward, exactly the normal list. There's no really changes. This is just like the really aggressive matchups like Syndra and stuff like that. You're not going to fatigue, so you don't need Remembrance. You'd rather have the instant ability to get Nourishing back with that like play line. It happens, it's good. Sometimes you just need it. But for the most part, you're not really like changing around much. Blaze, you're cutting as many red traps and DX as you can, and trying to keep the ones that, in the case that they run attacks, are at least as effective as possible, which is why you keep Sink below. Shelter is still good because it can prevent some arcane. Just be careful with it. And then you bring in as many resources as you can, like with Poison the Well. And then 3 AB, obviously. Mid-range, you're kind of playing a not quite fatigue, but having enough resources to end the game kind of thing. So you're cutting Memorial Grounds in favor of a little bit more defensive capability with Oasis, because we'll say like KO, for example. There's times where they just send a 2-card 7. So you being able to block with a card and then Oasis and like still have a card in hand to either attack with Talishar or Arsenal is like still pretty effective. And you keep the Remembrance because, again, it can kind of sometimes go long, so you want to be able to like Nourishing Codex, get them back and have extra damage in deck, because this equals, bringing this back equals 6, bringing all 3 back equals 18. And then you have certain matchups like, you could justify having Memorial Ground instead of Remembrance. It's helped me before. That's a preference thing. I did it today, but at the same time, I don't think it's incorrect to also go Remembrance. It's a either or kind of thing. Non-CYB decks, you're basically just playing the game plan of kind of fatigue, but you're not ringing in Poison the Well, and you're just like trimming a little bit of stuff and having Remembrance. So you're still able to block efficiently, but like they're going to attack you, so you're going to start running out of resources, so you try to keep recovering them as much as possible. But then when you get to CYB decks, which is kind of terror here, those matchups are going to go way longer, and I would say that Assassin would fall under this because, you know, they're not gonna really need as many of these. However, I will say that I used good reasoning to determine whether or not they have CYB and whether or not you need a little bit more block, a little bit more recovery. It's just a lot of flexibility on the deck. But against CYB type of decks, Terra, you're bringing in Poison the Well. You're not blocking as much, so you're keeping both Memorials and both Remembrance to have as much instances of nourishing as possible. And yeah, that's you're cutting go against stuff. And then I cut a blue because we didn't need the extra blue, and that was just the best slot to keep the Poison the Well. And then Verdance, you're kind of doing the same thing as Blaze, but a little bit differently because you cut and go against stuff. You don't need as many resources because they're not going to explode you, but you do want to be able to block, and you want to be able to block efficiently. So it's kind of like a mix of the two. But that's pretty much the deck. This deck has a lot of nuances behind it. It's not exactly the most easy in the world. Check out that video that we did. It was really fun. It was a great day. There were some really rough matchups, and there were some insanely funny matchups. This deck is really entertaining, but you also got to be aware of the limitations it has, because there's just going to be some metas, some areas that it's just not going to excel in, so just be aware of that. But hope you have fun with it. Enjoy.